Thank you for joining us today for this special podcast presented by the Georgia Municipal Association. Today, we'll be discussing the benefits of attracting breweries and distilleries to your downtown developments. Craft beer and spirits continue to grow in popularity across the U.S., with craft beer sales up 8% in 2017 and craft spirits seeing an impressive 23.7% growth rate. Consumers also have renewed passion for their city's downtown areas, as we've seen with the revitalization in areas like Woodstock and Kennesaw. Many people make the choice to enjoy their leisure time closer to home, and having a variety of amenities available helps them to accomplish that. Breweries and distilleries frequently become key destinations in downtown areas, helping to spur growth of related shopping and dining businesses and increasing tourism. Our panelists today will share insight from the perspective of city government, project and real estate developers, and professional brewers. I'm Tim Dennis, host of Beer Guys Radio, and without further delay, our panelists are Mayor Mike Eason of Dawsonville, Cheryl Wood, founder of Dawsonville Distillery, Carrie Stevens, assistant city manager of Avondale Estates, Nathan McGarity, co-owner and developer of Oconee Brewing Company, Taylor Lamb, co-owner and brewmaster of Oconee Brewing Company, and Rob Hopak and Stacia Familo Hopak of the Lost Druid Brewery. Mayor Eason, I'd like to start with you, as you and Cheryl have a very interesting project in your town. Dawsonville Distillery is under the same roof as City Hall. How did that partnership come about?
Well, it was a long process, and it's a very interesting concept. I was not part of that. The two previous mayors brought that to fruition here in our city. We're pleased to have them. They're a great asset to our community. One thing I want to clarify is we don't own the building. The Downtown Development Authority did, and that's part of the hurdle we had to overcome as to how do we get them in a public building. As you probably know, Dawsonville is well known for its fast drivers and its moonshine. And
two great things.
Two great things, and one rubs the other's back very well. Many of our famous drivers throughout the country come from Dawsonville. You may have heard of Bill Elliott, and now his son Chase Elliott. They're fast drivers, if I can say that properly. But the Racing Hall of Fame is part of our downtown city complex, which includes the Moonshine Distillery, and we think they're great partners. We think it's a great tribute to our heritage and how Dawsonville started and what it's all about, because wherever you go in this country, people want to talk about moonshine and fast driving when they say Dawsonville. I was at the mayor's conference last week, and when I was introduced, when I made my introduction and somebody started to ask about the moonshine being injected into the wastewater, we had a lot of questions about the distillery inside City Hall. And you probably don't find that many places in this country. But we think they're a great partner, and like I said, it evolves from our heritage in Dawsonville.
And Cheryl, when you opened up there, what were the biggest challenges for you as a business owner to opening in that area?
Well, when I opened up, I think we probably were the first one, so they really didn't know how to do it, as when I'm talking about the state. And we had to make two businesses, one for the gift shop and one for the distillery, and you couldn't even taste it. So that was huge. And we're going to talk about this a little later in the program, but the laws changed as far as tasting and sales goes. So you actually had to do two separate businesses to have a retail sales there as well as your distillery. And we couldn't sell the alcohol at all unless it went wholesale out the back door to distribution. Okay.
And then now, did you have an alcohol license at your gift shop, or was that just gifts? Well, you couldn't, I guess, separate business there, right?
Absolutely. Right. So the laws have changed about 3 times since we've been open. So.
And how did you structure your partnership there, having that in the public space?
Like, what do you mean?
As far as what was your agreement with the city? Was there anything special you had to do due to the location that you chose?
Yes. Well, as far as the city, they were great about helping out with it. Like Mayor said, Mayor Eason, even though he wasn't there, it was Mayor Cox at the time. And it was the missing piece of the puzzle. So it was fine there. But as far as the state and the federal, it was like a catch-22 almost, because when we were trying to get open, we had actually had the still made up in Kentucky, brought it down, unloaded it. Then the next morning, we had the state agents there wanting to confiscate the still.
Okay, all right. And that's because, in case people aren't aware, you can homebrew beer in the state of Georgia or in the U.S., but home distilling is still not allowed. So it's a little tougher for a distillery to practice, so to speak, correct?
Right. So you had to have your final permit to legally have an operational still, but you couldn't get the final permit until you had the final inspection, so everything had to be operational. So anyway, the agents showed up the next morning after we unloaded the still, even though we didn't have a boiler or anything, so it really wasn't operational. It was just a big copper pot at that point. But they said they would have to confiscate it, so then they held me in there, and then I had to call the lawyer, spend all day, and of course more money. Then the mayor at the time was like, "Oh no, what's happening?" And then people were looking in the windows, and but what? Come to find out, someone had sent an email to the state and said that we were making illegal alcohol.
Okay.
In City Hall.
Yeah, here in City Hall, right?
Yeah. So then they had to come and follow up on any emails or complaints that they had. So that's what they were doing. And one of the state agents there, I said I thought it was a joke. So I was laughing in the beginning because I thought it was like a prank. Because I had his cell phone number in my cell phone, and we had already been talking, and so it made no sense. But then he just totally ignored me, and was strictly business. Then I realized,
So that kind of relates to another question that I had about having public opposition to something like this. You mentioned, were there difficulties that you faced other than a couple random calls? Was there much opposition to the partnership or to the distillery in general?
From the city standpoint, I've talked with some people that were there during those times, and in all the public hearings and the input from the public, we didn't have any opposition to it, which was kind of surprising to me. Georgia's a pretty Baptist community, and I'm a Baptist, so but we had no opposition on file. Nobody complained, and it just sailed through the local legislation process for the permitting and the partnership.
Okay. Do you think that was partly due to Dawsonville kind of being known as a moonshine area?
I think it probably is. I mean, you can look around, and just about everybody that's a native there probably had somebody in the moonshine business doing something, either making it, hauling it, or drinking it.
Or drinking it, yes. It's the circle of life.
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah. Well, on the subject there, as far as public opinion in those kind of issues, we do know, as you mentioned, Mary Eason, Georgia in general is still a fairly conservative state. There's a lot of areas that do have a lot of religious beliefs that may affect this. So does anyone here have any input to share maybe some things that can kind of calm that for the people that do have those types of concerns?
Well, as far as ours goes, it's not a bar. And I think that's one of the feedbacks you have from the public is, it's a bar. There's going to be fights. The police are going to be there all the time. There's always going to be problems. Well, with us, our distillery, you get a sample and you get a bottle to go if you buy it. So, it's not a place where you're going to have a lot of problems. And I think that was the easiest way to get that inside of the city's property is by not having a bar and selling liquor and, having people there and hanging out drinking. They do allow samples, and they didn't initially, but they do now. And it's an interesting dynamic to watch it at work, and particularly as it relates to our Racing Hall of Fame, which is they have a common door they can go in and out between each other, and it works out really well.
Now, Cheryl, I'm not familiar as much with the new laws for the distilleries and that. I know the laws on the brewery side fairly well. And again, we'll talk more in depth in that. But are you allowed to sell liquor by the drink from your distillery now?
We are allowed to. We haven't approached that yet, but we're in talks about it, especially with the events that would be held there at the Racing Museum. So it is something that we're going to start doing. In the past, as far as the Moonshine Festival, the Racing Museum, which is a nonprofit organization, has been serving the moonshine cocktails for the Moonshine Festival. So this is something that we're going to get more involved with and doing cocktails for events and things like that.
Mary Eason, have you seen an increase in tourism with the addition of the distillery?
I think it brings people to our city. We don't have a lot up there. We're a small town. And the Racing Hall of Fame and the Distillery and the Atlanta Motor Sports Park are our big draws for up there. And we're trying to work together to coordinate events with them, to partnership with each party so that it brings more people to our community. As you mentioned, the Moonshine Festival, we'll have 25 to 50,000 people there on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday every year. And it's the 52nd annual Moonshine Festival in Dawsonville. It's quite an event. A number of the mayors at the mayor's conference wanted information about when it was and to come see it. And some of the mayors asked me about Cheryl's information so they can maybe partner with a distillery in their city. Not necessarily in their city hall. We'll probably keep that to ourselves.
Keep that to Dawsonville. That's your idea,
yeah,
right?
Right.
Excellent. Taylor, I got a question for you here. We talked a little bit about the laws changing here. Sure. And the big one here, especially for breweries and distilleries, SB 85 passed in Georgia in 2017. There were a few things that implemented, but the biggest one was allowing direct sales to the consumer, which was just massive for the development of breweries and that. Oconee Brewing Company was open before the law change went into effect.
Correct.
So what have you seen change for your brewery under these new laws?
Yeah, I mean, from the consumer side, it gives a lot more freedom. And so we opened May of 2017, so several months before the new law took effect in September. So it kind of did away with that tour and tasting structure. And if somebody wanted to come in and just buy 1 pint of beer and sit there and consume it, then they had that ability. If they want to pick up a 6-pack or a growler, then they could swing by the brewery and take that home. So it was much more customizable for each individual coming to the brewery, and for our local area, folks enjoyed being able to come down and kind of hang out in the tasting room. It's worth noting that at the time that the law passed, the state of Georgia as a whole was 48th in breweries per person per capita, 41st in economic impact per capita, and 17th overall in craft production. So SB 85 was instrumental in kind of improving the breweries per capita. So I think it's worth noting, looking at some of these statistics, that at the time when SB 85 was passed, Georgia as a whole was 48th in breweries per capita, 41st in economic impact per capita, and 17th in overall craft production. So we made improvements in overall craft production and economic impact, but we've slipped to 50th in breweries per capita. So, we're still, Georgia as a whole, still playing catch up to, pretty much every state in the nation, and especially the southern states when you just kind of look at our southern region. So, we still have a long way to go to catch up.
I think that with us slipping to 50th in breweries per capita kind of shows that the growth of the industry as a whole across the country, because Georgia has seen tremendous growth in the breweries that we have in the state in just the last couple of years. So it shows that craft brewing is still very popular around the U.S.
Absolutely, and still a lot of opportunity within our home state of Georgia here. Absolutely.
Now, Nathan, I know that your family is long time in the area, and to the tourism question, have you seen with you opening Oconee Brewing Company, have you seen tourism increase in the area?
Yeah, we brought in about 8,000 people within the first 9 months. So if you're averaging out about 14,000 people annually, it's been huge for bringing a lot of people into the lake area. At Lake Oconee is a big draw anyhow, but to bring people to downtown, to walk the main street and broad streets of a small town that maybe played second fiddle to a much larger economic engine. I mean, it's been very impressive.
And with SB 85, when Oconee Brewing opened under the old laws, you had to open to look at some volume because you were required to distribute your product. With the new laws, with SB 85, we're seeing a lot of smaller places opening that are focusing on maybe selling out of their tap room a lot more than distribution. And we'll speak to Rob and Stacia in a little bit with Lost Druid. Their plan is mostly from the tap room, correct? So it's something that you're able to do that now where you couldn't have done it a couple of years.
Yeah, it's one thing to note that the National Brewers Association has actually updated some of their definitions. They used to just have brew pubs and production breweries, and now they've identified in their definitions, they call it taproom breweries. So it's your smaller community, really neighborhood-based breweries, and I think it's really appropriate with the amount of growth that we've seen. I think everybody's kind of focusing on a little more nano regionalized, just a very localized marketing strategy.
Nathan, question for you, talking about the ease of opening. You and I met last week and talked about a special project that you've got coming up that may help someone in planning in the state of Georgia to open up a little bit easier. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we actually call it Project Hummingbird for its size. It's actually it's a production services program where we actually to not go into too much of the details, but it's the way it works is we knew that breweries were having difficulty opening and keeping up with other state national averages because of the amount of debt and capital. I mean, brewing is a very capital intensive industry. So what we did was we looked at our programs and what we were actually doing in house and said, okay, now how can we make this more affordable for others to go into it? And what we identified was that we could actually cut out a lot of the equipment that was not necessarily needed on a day-to-day, consolidate that, bring it into pretty much a co-op scenario and offer it up to multiple new breweries that might be opening with this model. So it allows us to pretty much plant breweries in smaller communities because they have less debt. They're more likely to succeed. And the backbone of it is that we actually produce the wort and distribute the wort based on the recipes that we receive in from the breweries. So, for instance, a brewer would have their own community's brand and name. They design the recipes. Then they scale it up on the system that we have, and then each time they need a subsequential, need to scale up that recipe, they give us a call, and then we send the wort their way.
So rather than having to get a huge brew house and have all this production, you can help out having that first step, kind of the process done for them. They can get the wort in their brewery, ferment it, and have the beer there in house, but reduce the initial financial requirement to open up.
Right. Our initial numbers have come in. Just to give you kind of an idea, if you're opening up a brew pub, just the brewing equipment side, you're looking anywhere from $500,000 to $700,000 very easily. And you're doing, you've got a lot of labor. You can't, once you have this machine on, you can't just flip it off. So this system actually allows, somebody to come in with a brewer, and they're calling out all that heavy labor load and putting it over into where we have it in house. So we also are able to reduce the amount of equipment in the hundreds of thousands. Our first pilot's coming out about $225,000, and then we think we can shrink that down to about $170,000. That's just for the equipment. That doesn't have anything to do with building or if you're doing, modulating this in with a brew pub. It doesn't have anything to do with food. So, but that gives all the flexibility of designing beers, producing the beer, but also scaling it up to meet your community's needs.
Nathan, it sounds like Taylor, it sounds like Nathan's got a plan to work you a lot harder.
Yeah, we got our work cut out for us.
Like. All right, good deal. And Nathan, one more question for you here, and talking about buildings and locations, I think you're a good one to talk to there because the building that you chose to build in, I believe, is it correct? You own that building at the time that you built the brewery, correct?
Right. We own the building, and I think we acquired it back in, I think it was 2013 after half the building fell in.
Because it was in pristine shape when you built out, right?
We used to call it the boathouse because it was so much water in there.
Right.
It would rain 3 days after it was sunny. So,
but honestly though, this was a distressed building. I believe built 1898, an old cotton mill warehouse. Is that correct?
But actually, it was originally a bottling plant for a company called Cherry-Cola, and then it got acquired in the 30s to be there's a finished product warehouse for the cotton mill next door.
Okay, so why did you choose to build in a location like that as opposed to acquiring a building that was in better shape or just building from the ground up?
I think Taylor and I both really believe in small town development, and that we got to know each other through small town networks, and it's kind of been something that's in our blood, just to the pride. And we joke about it that some people would say that we were in the middle of nowhere, and we actually found out we were in the middle of everywhere.
Okay.
And two is, I mean, worth noting that with it being an old building, it has exposed brick walls and these hand poured concrete walls, and incorporating a lot of the original wood, and we built a big barn door for separating our event space, and so utilizing as much of the original structure as possible enhance the overall character of the building, which folks that come to the brewery can see and can experience as well.
Yeah, for those that haven't been there yet, it's just a really awesome space that very modern and open, but you still keep the antique kind of old South feel with the way you've got it laid out there. And I think we're kind of seeing a trend for breweries to look to these types of that. Can you speak to that, Nathan, as far as the locations brewers are choosing?
Right. One of my opinions is that first you want to go, and this is a kind of quote my father that whom I work with. He says, you got to go where it feels good, where it feels. He always says he buys based on feel, and I mean I think you start with that, and but I mean just to kind of reiterate some of my opinions about the area. We have one of the highest per capita incomes zip codes out of anywhere in the state. And not that was really the deciding factor for us, but if you look at it, there are retired corporate individuals all across different fields of work, and they're coming to small rural Georgia. That should tell us all something. Don't wait 30 years and be burnt out on life to find that way back to what you might find is just you're going to find that it's your roots, whether you're from a small town or not. It's just going to feel right. But the other thing, too, is that with us having a historic building in a small town, we encounter what a lot of small communities encounter. I call it the appraisal vortex. It's this little thing where you have prior investment that maybe has deteriorated through whatever economics, whether it be mills moving out of jobs moving out of a community or whatever, just transitions. So you might have where an appraisal will not be high enough to meet the collateral needs of a bank, and therefore the bank requires more collateral and obviously would end up becoming cash from a business owner. That exhausts their cash availability, and then it makes it harder for them to succeed, do the things that they need to do in their business to become more efficient, and therefore propagates this, appraisal vortex. If they go under, then it creates a blighted property. So one of the big things with our building and the opportunities was that we saw that the utilization of subordinated debt programs, and this kind of goes into how you structure your financing. With us having a historic building, we were applicable for the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is it's a subordinated debt program, meaning that it'll come as a second lien position to any bank. And the reason that the banks like that second lien position debt is because that in an event of a catastrophe, that they actually are protected to be made whole first. We also use the Georgia Cities Foundation, which awesome programs, subordinated debt, but they're even better because they work well for us because they actually have fixed interest rates and are amortized over decent periods. So despite the some people say, oh, these programs are kind of have some strings attached. That's great. It's true, but you can also read the regulations and figure them out. It's not rocket science. These programs weren't developed by aliens. They were trying to help communities grow. So with our program, with the brewery in Greensboro, it was really nice because we were able to use these programs to redevelop the historic property.
It sounds a little like rocket science to me. There,
I can try again.
We can get.
Let me back it up.
I'm sure if you looked into a little bit more, you could break it. It could be broke down for someone looking to take advantage. But,
of those, Taylor and I are always available to help anybody that has any interest in growing the industry in the state. We're always here. So
and when we post this show, we'll definitely include contact info for those that do want to reach out for additional information on this.
Avoid the appraisal vortex.
Avoid the vortex there. Wasn't there a Domino's commercial about avoid the noise?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Carrie, Avondale Estates has a very lively downtown area, and you have Wild Heaven Beer that's in Avondale Estates, and we have the Lost Druid Brewery that's currently under construction in Avondale Estates. As Assistant City Manager, what appeals to you about having these types of businesses in Avondale Estates?
We're very excited to have both of our breweries. Just a little background on Avondale Estates. It was founded in the 1920s, and it's known as the first planned community in the Southeast. And we have our iconic Tudor Village area, which has the Tudor-style buildings. But there's an area of the city that's very industrial oriented, and it's faltered for many, many, many years. And the great part about the breweries is they take over and repurpose some of your industrial buildings. And also, as with the Lost Druid, they took an underutilized vacant piece of property and are now redeveloping it. So this will give a lift to our entire industrial portion of our downtown, and it'll also provide gathering spaces and a great area for our community to visit and also for our visitors to enjoy.
Now, Rob or Stacia, what was the reason that you decided to build in Avondale Estates?
Well, we looked in many different parts of the metro Atlanta area, and what we were really looking for is a community-focused parcel of land, whether it was a rental property or a property that we could develop ourselves, because we really believe in kind of the pedestrian way to move around a city and go from one place to the next. And when we started to kind of spread outside of Atlanta proper itself, and we found Avondale, it was just by chance of driving around that we happened to find this land. And Rob found the master plan that Avondale Estates has on their website of their vision for the city. And it was based off of really reading through that master plan of how they want to become more pedestrian focused, more bike focused. They already have golf carts running around the area a bit. And we just felt that it was a great place for us to really focus and find that parcel that we could build on and create that community taproom focused business.
And we talked a little bit earlier about the law changes and kind of the trends that we're seeing, and we do see a shift to people looking for that local, drink local, is a phrase we use in the craft beer industry a lot for people. And people want to stay there closer to home. They want to stay. If you're from Avondale Estates, you want to enjoy Avondale Estates for dining and that. You're taking advantage of the new laws under SB 85, and you will do most of your sales, I believe, if not all, from your tap room. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we're pretty much targeting roughly 98% of our sales through the tap room. We're only going to, probably the first year, just focus on doing anything in terms of distribution will be keg focused, and it will be event driven, and just to a few select accounts that are craft beer focused.
And what made you decide to go with that method as opposed to maybe a more distribution oriented?
Well, one, and any brewer in Georgia can attest to it, and any brewer anywhere, you certainly have higher profit margins when you keep it in-house. It's, I believe right now, and Taylor might be able to speak to this a little bit more since you guys have been around for a little bit, but I think somewhere around the metric is every case returns $1 or something along those lines, whereas you can make $1 on a pint in-house.
A little difference there in the profit, right?
Yeah. But also for us, we want to be very nimble and have a lot of variety for people, because particularly folks that we're around, some of them are still new to beer, and they'll say, oh, we don't really like beer. And I think it's that they haven't experienced enough to find what it is that they like.
Carrie, is there any advice that you have, say, for a city manager or someone else involved with city government that wants to attract this type of business to their downtown area?
I think that one of the most important points is to be responsive to businesses that come in. Your ordinances are never perfect. You're always going to find issues that come up, but you need to listen to your businesses and see what their needs are and make sure that you can meet those needs in as much of a quick process as possible. We've worked with the Lost Druid since the beginning, and I try to be as responsive to them and fix problems as quickly as possible. We also are involved with the Main Street program. We've worked with the Georgia Cities Foundation and the revolving loan funds, and worked with our Downtown Development Authority. We also have some tools in our toolbox to help local businesses, such as the Opportunity Zone. We've just been designated a rural zone, which is also a tax incentive program. And generally just being responsive and making sure that you can meet the needs of your businesses as they move forward.
And what's really been great for us is a partnership with Avondale Estates, and I don't know what it partially probably because they are a very small community, is that they can be more flexible and nimble for our needs. So early on, we had some issues working with DeKalb County, and because they deal with the watershed management, both water and sewer has to get approved and permitted through DeKalb County versus through the city. And DeKalb's been having some issues on those fronts that they're dealing with, which slowed up our ability to get permits. And I could bring an issue to Carrie, who could then take it to the mayor, who then was able to bring the county to the table so that we can talk through how do we resolve these issues so that we can get moving versus being stalled. And that was just one of several examples where Carrie, representing the city, has been very beneficial to us as a small startup trying to do this on our own. We don't have big investors. It's us, and we're trying to make it happen and move things forward.
Nathan, you be able to speak to this, or Carrie. I've heard of breweries trying to develop in areas where they were just basically shut down. We don't want that here. Is there anything that may encourage them, to kind of loosen those restrictions and do that? Because I believe Avondale Estates has been pretty open, even since Wild Heaven opened several years ago, correct?
Yeah, what we had to do, speaking of zoning ordinances, is that our original ordinance didn't contemplate a brewery at all. And I'm sure there's a lot of ordinances, in the state of Georgia that did not. So we had to be very nimble, using your word, to get Wild Heaven because we didn't even have an ordinance that could even address it. So we did it as quickly as possible, added it into our zoning code. We also added in different tastings and things to respond to the needs of that brewery. Our community was very, very responsive on a positive level to getting the breweries. But I think in hindsight, it's not just the brewery that we're getting. We're getting a gathering space. We're bringing in people from out of town. We can partner with City of Decatur, which also has a number of breweries. So it's been an economic catalyst for the city. And we've been really happy to have them in the city for that reason as well.
Nathan, Taylor, were there any ordinances that you had to get changed or any law changes to locate in Oconee?
Yeah, actually, Greensboro was really good with helping us. We actually sat down with the city attorney to with several formats of other cities that have favorable legislation to supporting craft breweries. So they were able to kind of custom tailor.
Yeah, just extremely supportive. Their approach was, how can we help? And I think they saw the overall benefit that, hey, this brewery is setting up in this area of downtown Greensboro that's undergoing this revitalization, and it's going to bring people in our market from, the lake area and beyond to downtown Greensboro. And if they're coming down and having a beer, then they're, likely to go up on Main Street and have lunch or dinner and hit some of the shops as well. And
that's something
they saw that
we see in many of these downtown areas. I personally live in Woodstock, and Reformation Brewery just built a very nice location there in our downtown area. And as you mentioned, people will frequently say, I'm going to stop at Reformation Brewery and have a beer. I'm going to go over here and grab some lunch. And then we have a lot of associated shops there, gift shops, clothing stores, and all of that. So it can become an anchor point, really, to a downtown development. People come there for that relaxation places, like you said, Carrie, gathering spaces. You can watch the game. A lot of breweries offer things like trivia, comedy nights, different things. So it becomes really a destination. It's I think some of the opposition just sees that it's an alcohol-related business, but these are important parts of a community.
And one thing that we're looking into right now is what a lot of places call an entertainment district. And this will further our pedestrian-friendly downtown, where you'll be able to take a certain amount of alcohol and walk around in a certain district, which will include where the breweries are and where our shops and restaurants are. So we're working on that in the next few months.
Sometimes when people talk to us about how great the building is, you say, "Listen, we didn't build anything. It was already here. Because we're a historic building. It was already here. Y'all already had it." And I don't mean to sound too much like Michelangelo, but the sculptures and the marble. But one of the things that we did that was very unique, we added a big glass wall in the back of the building, so I can understand where some people say, "Well, yeah, you modified the building quite a bit to make something really pretty." And we followed our passions, but one of the things that hasn't changed is the people, and the people have always been there. So if you like the people in a community and they want you there and want you part of it, I think you'll probably find a lot of friends.
Now, we talked a little bit about trends and growth and that. Georgia currently has approximately 85 breweries and brewpubs. I say approximately because they keep opening every day, and we may have a few more than that. And I believe, if I looked up the numbers correctly, 18 distilleries in the state. Now, over the last couple of years, that's continued to grow. We've seen a lot of that happening, and we've seen changes in the types of beverages that people are consuming. More people are fitness conscious. They watch their calories. I mean, a lot of these big craft beers, they're delicious, but they can be very heavy in the calories. So, Taylor, Rob, what kind of styles do you offer? Has that changed? And what do you see coming in the future here?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we had to take into account our local market, and when trying to identify, all right, well, what flagship beers do we want to launch with, and given our close proximity to Lake Oconee, we thought, all right, well, hey, we need something light, and we landed on a German style Kolsch, and kind of considered that this gateway beer into the craft beer industry. And so, folks that are used to drinking the standard domestics, well, maybe you can convince them to drink, try the Kolsch. And if they like that, then maybe that opens their mind to trying some of the other craft styles as well. So I think there will always be a place for the lighter beers. Industry wide, I feel like there's a lot of, sours are still very popular. The IPAs aren't going anywhere. But our approach was kind of going back to basics and going back to some of the more basic styles that have been around for hundreds of years, and kind of putting our own interpretation and twist on those styles.
And that's something I think that people who are not craft beer drinkers, from the outside looking in, a lot of people see it as pretentious. Mm-hmm. They see there's an attitude there, but everyone enjoys craft beer. And there's what we call drinking beers. It doesn't have to be pretentious. There are people who do take that attitude, but a lot of people just like enjoying a good quality made local beer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as Stacia noted, we were focusing on our tap room, allowing for a lot of flexibility. And we are taking an approach that we're not actually going in with any flagships. And it's kind of the luxury of being taproom focused. When you're not really trying to fight for any shelf space, you don't have to worry about having something that's going to be there all year round. And so we're going to take an approach of doing a lot of sessionable beers, but we really want to start soliciting feedback from the community. We're going to have 12 beers that are served off our serving tanks. So we'll also have an additional 8 taps that will be for some smaller batch beers that we'll kind of bring out to just kind of test the waters. And we'll see whether or not the community starts to embrace them, or if we start getting some requests of types of beers to do. We'll throw those on there, see how well they're received, and then if they go off pretty well, then we'll brew larger batches of those and just see where the community drives us.
Right, because when you're looking at a distribution model, you have to do a huge batch size to be able to distribute and make any profit off of it. But if you can do a smaller batch, then you do have the ability to listen to the community, or what you like as a brewer, or what the community likes. It's a lot easier to do that when you're not having to do 40 barrels, thousands of gallons at a time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Rob, another thing that SB 85 has allowed that wasn't previously allowed at breweries is the ability to sell food. And we do see breweries taking advantage of that. Will the Lost Druid Brewery take advantage of that?
Yes, we will. Avondale has been incredibly accommodating in immediately latching on to our requests to be able to open up a kitchen within the brewery. We're taking a kind of a hybrid approach to our kitchen. So it's not a full-scale brew pub, but it's not just some pretzels and peanuts. We're going to kind of come out with some flatbread, sandwiches, salads, and a lot of tapas-oriented dishes. And Avondale's been great at saying, yeah, we want it. Let's make it happen. And so that's what we're doing.
Taylor, Nathan, I know that you didn't originally set up with that, but any plans to make that kind of modification at Oconee?
None in the immediate future. I mean, our model kind of relies on food trucks to come in and set up right outside, and folks can go out there, snag some food, and bring it back inside. So we'll likely stick with that for now, but not to say that we wouldn't rule that option out later on down the road.
But the food trucks brings up another kind of a partnership and attracting and helping other businesses, because a lot of breweries just want to brew beer. They don't want to have the food. So partnering with food trucks gives a nice option at the brewery, and you're giving the food truck a good place to sell a lot of their food.
Absolutely, and variety too. I mean, you can have barbecue one week, and then maybe it's pizza the next. So kind of switches it up from week to week.
Once again, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and sharing your expertise. As you can hear, there's a lot of great reasons to open a brewery or distillery in your downtown area. For more information, visit georgiacitiesfoundation.org. Once again, we thank the Georgia Municipal Association for organizing this podcast. We hope you have a great week. Cheers.